Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Randall. This is the McClures. We react, review, make fun of, and laugh at stuff over here. www.mcclures.store is the sponsor. If you'd like to buy quality American products, see if they have anything that you could utilize. Links are down in the description, of course. A little bit different today. 15 secrets the Vatican doesn't want you to know. We are live on Rumble Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 3:30 to 5:30 when we're recording this. This kind of just fell into my lap today on the live, so we're jumping into it. But come join the lives, get your request in, and you can steer us in whatever direction you want. Well, let's get into this. 15 secrets the Vatican doesn't want you to know.
This is a map of Rome, and at its center is the Vatican city-state, an extraordinary territory considered an independent sovereign entity belonging to the Holy See. Believe it or not, the Vatican is the smallest state in the world, with an area of 49 hectares and a population of just 453 people. The Vatican is considered one of the most sacred places in the world for Christians. Being the greatest, most formidable historical and spiritual place, Vatican City is an incredibly influential and powerful state, despite the ridiculously small size and population. It was declared a sovereign state by the Lateran Treaty in 1929, but this city, full of architectural and artistic masterpieces, has been the center of Christendom for about 2 millennia. But the medieval Renaissance walls surrounding the Vatican like a fortress.
It is an amazingly beautiful place, though. I mean, the architecture and the buildings are phenomenal.
Don't seem to be doing a great job of keeping all the shady secrets from spilling out. For about a century now, we have been hearing all kinds of rumors regarding the abominable practices and crimes of the Vatican. Some of these were so brutal that decades later, apologies had to be issued to the public by the Pope. There have been quite a few unsavory incidents in this nation's past that should be addressed. So what exactly lies behind all the splendor and wonderment of this prestigious and privileged city? Here's an account of some sinister secrets and incredibly questionable things the Vatican has done they don't want you to find out about. 1. The 3 Secrets of Fatima. Although these are no longer secrets, the Vatican is still relatively tight-lipped about these apocalyptic visions and prophecies. All 3 of these secrets have caused significant waves in Catholic circles. But the third one has garnered considerably more attention from the masses. These prophecies were reportedly blessed by a Marian apparition to 3 young Portuguese shepherds. The apparition is now famous as Our Lady of Fatima. Portuguese shepherds Lucia Santos and her cousins Jacinta and Francisco Mato claimed they were visited by the Virgin Mary 6 times between May and October 1917. Lucia gained more attention from the press worldwide as she was the one who revealed the secrets to the public at the request of a local bishop. Naturally, people demanded proof for such a claim, so during the final apparition of Fatima that occurred in October 1917, Mary performed the sun dance in the sky. This event was reported by newspapers and was witnessed by thousands of people. However, this divine visual was no match for the unrest the 3 secrets caused. The children were supposed to keep these secrets and not tell anyone, but eventually, 20 years after the event, Lucia wrote down the first 2 secrets. She was hesitant about revealing the third one, however, under the bishop's orders, she had to. But she wrote this 3rd secret on paper and placed it in a sealed envelope that was not to be opened until 1960. The first secret was actually a vision of hell. According to Lucia, the children were given a glimpse of hell by the Blessed Virgin. They witnessed the suffering of souls there, and it was almost...
Well, if Mary did visit these 3 children and give them these 3 secrets, why? If they're not supposed to ever tell anybody, what's the point then?
Almost unbearable to look at. The 2nd secret was also a vision in which the children learned how World War I was going to end, and another world war would ensue under the papacy of Pope Pius XI. The 3rd one is the most famous secret that no one was aware of until 1960, and even then a selective few knew what was written on the piece of paper in the envelope. Its contents were made public much later, in the year 2000. Vatican described this 3rd secret as a vision of the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. In the vision, the bishop, dressed in white, makes his way toward the cross with incredible difficulty. Corpses of martyrs surround him. After reaching the top of the mountain where the cross is, he is killed by bullets and arrows. Lucia also described 2 angels present under each arm of the cross, each one holding a crystal aspersorium in which they were gathering the blood of martyrs. They were sprinkling this blood on souls making their way to God. According to Catholic interpretations, these secrets were simply visions of hell, the 2 world wars, and the 20th century persecution of Christians, but many people believe that the entire third secret was not revealed by the Vatican. Number 2. Evidence of extraterrestrial life.
I don't know how I feel
In the
about that
17th
one.
century, select documents from the Vatican Library were moved and closed to outsiders under the orders of Pope Paul V until the year 1881. Researchers believe these archives contained explosive information that could threaten the Catholic Church doctrine. There's a lot of speculation regarding these archives containing records of extraterrestrial interactions chronicled by the Church. A Russian professor, Genrik Ludwig, allegedly gained access to these archives. This information is not confirmed or backed by any evidence, but there's a chance it could be accurate. These ancient texts contain about 12 centuries of European history. While sifting through the endless documents, Ludwig came across a few things that didn't make sense. There were papers discussing the way aliens had influenced almost all of the ancient civilizations. From Egyptians to Mayans, every culture had been in contact with extraterrestrial life in one way or the other. He also claims to have found records of weapons used in ancient times that quite closely resemble modern-day nuclear.
That's definitely an interesting theory. I have always been a believer of aliens until recently. Now I'm not so sure. I always thought that aliens existed. But now that the government says they exist, I'm a little skeptical.
Nuclear weapon.
But a lot of history says this.
One text stated that the walls of Babylon were melted by a weapon that exuded extreme amounts of heat. There are some wild claims, but there is no way of knowing whether he was telling the truth, as he didn't bring any evidence outside the Vatican. Number 3. Posthumous trial. Cadaver synod, the infamous trial of a cadaver, is an incident that speaks volumes about the eccentricity and stoicism infused in the spirit of Vatican City. This ecclesiastical trial of Pope Formosus was conducted in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, located in Rome. In January 897, Pope Stephen VI, the successor to Formosus, decided to hold this trial. This was a period marked by political instability lasting for almost a century. There was a rapid succession of pontiffs.
The reason I put lead gen on a license plate Lamborghini is because the fastest way that I found to 6-figure.
During this era, about 24 popes were appointed between the years 872 and 966. Formosus was accused of perjury, illegal accession to the papacy, and the ruling over more than one place at a time. But what makes this trial a historical event is that he was tried for these accusations 7 months after his death. Many believe this trial was just a vengeful attempt against Formosus for betraying Lambert of Spoleto by inviting Arnulf of Carthinia to become emperor. This did not settle well with Pope Stephen, who ordered the corpse of Formosus be exhumed from his tomb and brought to the papal courts. His remains.
So the church was butthurt that they got offended by something, so they held a trial for a dude 7 months after he died? That's some weird shit. Why? Again, what's the point? Mary comes down, trades or gives 3 secrets away to 3 shepherd girls, and they're not supposed to tell anybody? Then why come down and tell the shepherd girls? This. Trial of a dead dude. What's that gonna do?
Were propped up on a throne, and a deacon was appointed to answer on behalf of the dead pope. Eventually, the court declared him guilty. According to various sources, the court.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not only did they try the dude, they drug his corpse in there to be present.
Was stripped of his papal vestments, and Stephen cut off the 3 fingers of his right hand, used for blessings when Formosus was alive. Afterwards, his acts and ordinations were officially invalidated. The body was then interred in a graveyard for foreigners, but it was again dug up, tied to weights, and thrown in the Tiber River. There are a few accounts of his body washing up on the banks of the Tiber and allegedly performing some miracles. This macabre and brutal trial turned the Roman population against Stephen, who was deposed and imprisoned after a public uprising. He was strangled to death in prison in 897, and Pope Theodore II soon annulled the Cadaver Synod. Moses was rehabilitated, and his body was again buried in St. Peter's Basilica. Number 4. Vatican Leak Scandal. The Vatican Leaks, also known as VatiLeaks, is a sort of WikiLeaks for the Vatican. The scandal erupted in 2012 and involved leaked documents exposing horrendous incidents of corruption in the Vatican. A television program called The Untouchables is where it all began. Soon after, a book titled His Holiness, The Secret Papers of Benedict XVI exposed extremely controversial and confidential correspondence and memos between Pope Benedict and his personal secretary. The book revealed a lot regarding the Pope's finances and the tales of bribes that were given to procure an audience with him. The letters from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano unraveled extensive corruption schemes that cost the Holy See millions of dollars in inflated contract prices. Besides exposing power struggles in the Vatican and portraying the city as a hotbed for jealousy, political enemies, and factional fighting, VatiLeaks also revealed a document describing a discussion with Cardinal Paolo Romeo in which he predicted that the Pope would be dead within 12 hours. In addition to the financial crimes and a death threat, an internal Vatican investigation uncovered another scandal. According to this investigation, the homosexual clergy members of the church were being blackmailed by outsiders. Though none of that information was deemed particularly fatal, the reasons behind all the frenzy caused by the leaks wasn't their content, rather the accuracy of it. Pope Benedict labeled this information a false, exaggerated, and gratuitous rumor. A meeting involving all the high officials of Vatican City was held on July 26th, and a few months after this meeting, 2 Vatican aides were convicted. Paolo Gabriele, the personal butler of the Pope, and Claudio Schiappelletti, a computer specialist at the Secretariat of State, were the 2 aides. The Pope later pardoned them. Number 5. Vatican's own exorcist army. In this age of modern psychology and neuroscience, most of us dismiss the...
Wait, so they pinned it on 2 dudes to wrap up the story, and then they just pardoned them after the story died down? So those 2 dudes probably weren't even involved.
Practice of exorcism as a horror movie plot twist or a ritual from the Middle Ages when mental health and disease were not prevalent concepts. But surprisingly, this practice is very much alive and in fact thriving within the Catholic Church, thanks to the ignorance of many even today. Father Gabriele Amorth, who passed away in 2016, was the former chief exorcist at the Vatican. He reportedly performed a whopping 130,000 exorcisms during his time. And here we thought casting out demons was a ritual from the past. According to BBC reports, the Vatican welcomed 250 priests from around the world to attend an annual exorcism school in 2018. The Church believed that cases of demonic possession have significantly increased in recent years. Pope Francis advised people to seek help from an exorcist in case of genuine spiritual disturbances. Despite being a controversial procedure, often considered overly sensational and at times abusive, it has been carried out by popes even in the previous decade. Father Amorth mentioned an account of John Paul II trying to drive a demon out of a woman. She was brought to him in St. Peter's Square, screaming, writhing, and drooling. However, the Pope wasn't successful in ridding her of the demon. Father Amorth claimed she was still possessed when he later saw her, as she could walk up the wall like Spider-Man. He then had to finish what John Paul had started. Some people suspect Pope Francis also performed a public exorcism on a man in a wheelchair back in 2013. Psychiatrists and psychologists can object all they want, but the Vatican holds its grounds on the subject of exorcisms and aims to carry out this ritual in the future as well. 6. The Apocrypha Books.
Yeah, the exorcism thing, I don't know about all that. Exorcism is definitely a weird deal. Now, these aren't really like super duper secrets or anything. It's going over like past Vatican scandals, I guess.
In 1684, the Vatican decided to exclude 14 books from the Bible. They never provided an explanation as to why they did this. The only reason they offered was that these 14 books were only valuable for instruction but non-canonical. The Vatican is content with the general population not knowing what was in these books. Initially, the Bible contained 80 books when it was translated to English from the original one in Latin in 1611. Nowadays, we only have 66 of these. The missing Bible books are called the Apocrypha, which means hidden. These books include Esdras, Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, Songs of the Three Holy Children, Bel and the Dragon, Maccabees, and Prayer for Manasseh. Another peculiar thing is that Jesus was spelt as Jesus before the removal of these 14 books. The church changed the spelling as well as pronunciation. Originally, Jesus' name was pronounced Yahushua. There are quite a few theories out there speculating why these books were removed from the Bible.
Welcome to my funeral!
Now that is something I would like some more information on.
Some believe that the content of these books...
This is where I'm at in my current spiritual journey of my own, is deciphering how I feel on the validity of the Bible in its entirety.
wasn't in agreement with the narrative of the Roman Catholic Church. Others simply think that these books made the Bible too long and complicated, and that's why they were removed. But these are just assumptions. There's no definitive...
So the extra 14 books made it too long? It's already like one of the biggest books ever. Okay.
answer as to why these books were released, knowing that these books didn't contain anything particularly dangerous or sinister. Some Christian churches do include some parts or all of the text from these books in their versions of the Old Testament. 7. Jesus might have been married. The rumor about Jesus marrying Mary Magdalene and having babies has been around for a while. There is allegedly written evidence of this wild rumor. A manuscript from the 6th century is considered proof of this theory. It was translated from Greek to the ancient language of Syriac, and during this translation, the story of Jesus Christ's marriage was discovered. However, this was never mentioned in the Bible. There are detailed accounts of his birth and death, but the 30 years in between are wholly ignored in the Bible. This manuscript is called the Lost Gospel and tells the story of Jesus as a sexual person who fell in love with Mary Magdalene and fathered their babies. This is quite a controversial topic for the church for many reasons. This manuscript isn't that reliable to begin with. It is a real piece from the British Library, but no one knows its origin or when it was written. The manuscript also claims that Mary Magdalene was the daughter of God and co-redeemer of humanity. Basically, it implies that she was equally as important as Jesus, which, for obvious reasons, doesn't sit right with the Vatican. The Holy See has, after all, done everything in its power to wipe.
So if they think Mary Magdalene was the daughter of God and Jesus is the son of God, they think Jesus had an incestual relationship with his sister? Okay. That's one way to go, I guess. Meek thinks the Bible is stronger than the church, but it is still written by man. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the Bible. That's kind of been my thing right now. I've been doing some research into why those books were removed to figure out if I think they should have been or not. What's the one book? Enoch? I think we did a video on the Enoch book book that was removed as well. But yeah, I'd like to do some more research into that for sure.
Wash Jesus. Some historians believe that Jesus may have lived a stereotypical human life that the Vatican doesn't want us to know about. 8. A secret court for severe sins. Certain offences are considered extremely heinous in the Catholic justice system. Therefore, to investigate these and in order to try the ones who committed such sins, the Vatican has created its very own elite squad of bishops. They're called the Apostolic Penitentiary, the Tribunal of Conscience. This tribunal was founded in 1179 by Pope Alexander III, but was a well-kept secret by the Vatican until 2009. The job of this tribunal is to hear cases regarding sins that are so horrible that no one besides the Pope can pardon the ones who commit them. It is a known fact that regular priests can supposedly deal with inhuman crimes like genocide. It makes us wonder what extreme crimes are presented before this secret tribunal. Well, some of the crimes that could land you before this private court include attempting to assassinate the Pope, exposing the identity or sin of someone who confessed, a priest engaging in sexual activity, or someone engaging in sexual activity with a priest, performing or paying for an abortion, and more. In fact, spitting out a communion wafer is also considered a sin worse than genocide and will be tried by the Apostolic Penitentiary.
Spitting out a communion wafer is worse than genocide? Okay. That's one way to look at things, I guess. That's okay.
The Pope acts as the head of this tribunal investigating these vicious sins. He can then grant absolution to the one seeking mercy or allows the automatic excommunication to proceed. The cases in this court are heard privately and under fake names as the Church considers them a matter of conscience. Only the Vatican knows what kind of horrendous criminals are being tried and absolved by this tribunal. 9. Vatican helped Nazis escape. The shady past of the Vatican is full of crimes against humanity, but the vilest one has to be the silent support they lended to Nazis. It's a well-known fact that the Vatican was silent in the face of all of the atrocities committed by Nazi soldiers during the war. They turned a blind eye to the persecution of Jews under Hitler's regime. After World War II was over, thousands of defeated Nazi soldiers fled to South America through passages popularly known as rat lines. This wasn't a thoroughly structured system, it was more of a collaboration of different institutions that was established after the war ended. Many war criminals sought refuge abroad and fled Europe with the help from the Catholic Church. Among these were high-ranking Nazi officers like Franz Stangl, who perfected mass murder at concentration camps. Adolf Eichmann, who had organized the Holocaust, fled to Argentina. Josef Mengele, the sadistic doctor from Auschwitz concentration camp, took refuge in South Tyrol, Argentina, Paraguay, and eventually ended up in Brazil. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Leon, also fled to Bolivia. Walter Rauff, who invented mobile gas chambers and is responsible for murdering 97,000 people, escaped to Chile through the rat lines with the Vatican's assistance. Gerald Steinecker, a Harvard researcher, claimed in his book that some Red Cross members were exceptionally sympathetic towards the Nazis and supplied them with travel documents to escape. Still, Vatican also knowingly assisted many Nazi fugitives. According to Steinecker, the Vatican helped them in hopes of reviving European Christianity. They are also afraid of the growing Soviet influence. The Church has refrained from commenting on this so far. The documents relating to these escapes are still part of the secret archives of the Vatican, but qualified researchers might be granted access to these records at some point in the future. 10. Vatican's monetary gains from the Holocaust. If smuggling Nazis out of Europe wasn't a big deal for the Vatican, what makes you think they didn't smuggle what the Nazis looted? The Vatican used its power and privilege to help the Nazis launder the gold, art, and other expensive property belonging to Jewish families and other Holocaust victims. Gerald Posner from the Washington
I would assume that's how they got the help of the Vatican to get the former war crime guys out of there. That's how they paid for the, what do they call it, a rat line? You got to pay for the rat line, so they paid for it with stolen jewelry.
Washington Post explained in his opinion piece that the Vatican is not willing to get involved in restitution efforts or to open up its war-era archives. In his book, God's Bankers, Gerald explains that it's possible that the Vatican was trying to do something much more sinister than just trying to help Nazis keep the looted family heirlooms they had snatched away from the people they tortured and murdered. Bernardino Nogara, the Vatican financial advisor, was apparently a spy for the Third Reich. He was supposed to destroy the wartime archives in the
So you want to know where to invest $1,000 right now? Well, forget about stocks, real estate,
So the Vatican's
or cryptocurrency.
accountant
There is a
the Vatican.
Was a Nazi
Nogara and the
spy?
Nazis devised a scheme wherein the Vatican invested in Italian insurance companies. These companies retained all the assets from the life insurance plans of the murdered Jews. As the Vatican was only an investor, they didn't have to pay a single penny they made in this scheme. So basically, they didn't only provide safe passage to Nazi soldiers, they also gambled on the lives of Jewish people, stole from their heirs, and directly profited from the Holocaust. Makes you wonder what else they were involved with. Number 11. The 1994 Rwandan Genocide. The Pope offered a heartfelt apology to the victims of the Rwandan genocide in 2017, but is that really enough compensation for their suffering and pain? It's no secret the members of the Catholic Church were partially responsible for the immense number of deaths in Rwanda in 1994. Priests, nuns, and clergy members made things worse for the Tutsi ethnic group. Between April and June 1994, more than 800,000 ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed by Hutu extremists. This wave of violence was sparked by the Rwandan president, a Hutu, when his plane was shot down. The radio propaganda and presidential guard both encouraged this mass murder at the hands of the Interahamwe and ordinary citizens. Hutus were forced by military personnel to murder their Tutsi neighbors in many cases. About 200 priests and nuns were also killed, but others were complicit, and many even wholeheartedly took part in this mass murder. Thousands of Tutsis who took refuge in churches were slaughtered. About 5,000 people were killed at the Nasarama Catholic Church in August 1994. Father Athanasi Saromba, a priest, ordered his church to be bulldozed with 2,000 Tutsis sheltering inside. According to the UN's International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, charges were issued against Father Wenceslas Munyeshyaka for drafting lists of people to be killed and for raping women. The church was apparently compromised by its long-standing political ties to the ruling Hutus. They actively participated in this genocide of innocent human beings. Later, Rwanda's Catholic bishops apologized for these atrocities, and the Vatican said that the Pope sought God's forgiveness for the sins and failings of the church and its members, as well as the religious people who succumbed to hatred and violence. So basically, the Vatican looked away while its clergy members assisted and indulged in ethnic cleansing, and a few years later said that they were sorry, as if that makes it any better. 12. A female pope. According to legend, Pope Joan was a woman who reigned the Vatican as pope for an unknown number of years in the Middle Ages. She initially became famous in the 13th century, and her story subsequently spread throughout Europe. For many centuries, people believed it was true, but modern scholars think it was just a fabricated tale. In the story, she is described as an exceptionally talented woman who disguised herself as a man. Because of her abilities, she rose through the hierarchy of the church quite quickly and was eventually elected pope. Her gender was revealed only when she ended up giving birth during a procession, soon after which she died. Historians aren't sure whether she was murdered or died of natural causes. It is said that the church processions then started avoiding the spot where she gave birth, and the Vatican removed her from the official list. They also crafted a ritual to ensure that all future popes were male. In the 13th century, Martin of Opava introduced details about this mysterious female pope. According to him, her birth name was John Anglicus of Mainz. She reigned in the 9th century, and she had only entered the church in pursuit of her lover. But in the 16th century, Catholic and Protestant writers questioned the authenticity of this story and eventually concluded that this story is most probably fictional. T. Long history of child abuse. The Catholic Church has faced
into it, and it's probably fictional. What does that even mean? Yeah, exactly. We can help with Rwanda genocide, but if you spit out your wafer, then you're going to have to go to a special trial in front of the Pope. He's the only one who can save you if you spit out your wafer. Oh, God.
An avalanche of sexual abuse allegations in recent decades. These allegations come from towns in the Australian countryside, schools in Ireland, and many cities in the USA and Canada. The high-profile coverage and horrifying testimonies are keeping the matter continuously in the headlines. For years now, stories of predatory priests have been disgracing the faith of many people. These allegations initially came to light in the US in the 1980s, but the most heinous cases emerged from Ireland and Austria in the 90s. The disgraced case of priest Brendan Smith contributed to the fall of the Irish government in 1994. There was no policy to protect children. In fact, no one was even required to report crimes against children to the Vatican. The church leaders have been apologizing for these crimes for years now. Boston Globe newspaper from the US was one of the first to expose the pedophilia plaguing the church and ask victims to come forward and demand justice. Between the years 2000 to 2010, the US diocese made several settlements with victims. In the 1990s, many stories emerged from Argentina, Australia, and other countries. The Archbishop of Vienna had to step down amid sexual abuse allegations in 1995. The Boston Globe newspaper unraveled how instead of punishing the priests involved in sexual abuse, the church had resorted to moving them around. A report commissioned by the church itself in 2004 revealed that almost 4,000 priests had been accused of sexual abuse.
That's really what the horrible thing with the whole story was. I mean, obviously with any organization, there's going to be those people within it, especially any organization that has any authority over children. There's always going to be those people that go into it to take advantage of that situation. But where they screwed up is not throwing them to the wolves, so to speak. Just moving them around, keeping them in the church. That's where you screwed up. That's where you definitely screwed up. Obviously, it's going to happen. It happens everywhere, unfortunately. But you got to punish the people. You got to kick them out of the church. You got to actively work with, law enforcement to get charges against them. But no, they were like, oh, did you catch the guy on the west side? All right, we'll just move him over to the east side then. That's crazy.
Abuse in the past 50 years, involving 10,000 victims. Most of these victims were young boys. In 2019, Pope Francis promised the world that all the abusers would be punished. In the most recent inquiry, it was found that 216,000 children in France had been abused by clergy members since 1950. In his efforts to address this issue, Pope Francis held an unprecedented summit on pedophilia in the church and changed its laws to unambiguously criminalize sexual abuse. Despite that, alleged cover-ups are still happening in the Vatican. Critics believe the Pope hasn't done enough to hold accountable the bishops who allegedly covered up abuse. Cardinal Bernard Law, the disgraced figure found at the center of the Boston scandal, was allowed to maintain his rank and was awarded a symbolic role.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean. If you let the guy keep his rank and then, 5 years later, you're still going to give him awards for shit, then you don't really care.
Close to the Vatican by Pope John Paul II. This decision caused a lot of outrage among victims, but to no avail. It seems like the Vatican only talks about punishing sexual abusers, but in reality, it might be a safe haven for many pedophiles. 14. The case of Duplessis orphans. Back in the 1930s and 1940s, a conservative revolution initiated by Premier Maurice Duplessis led Quebec into an era now remembered as the Great Darkness. He rose to power with help from the Catholic Church and ruled as the Premier of Quebec between 1936 and 1959. His period is marked with controversies particularly associated with the abuse and corruption concerning the Duplessis orphans. Between 1940 and 1960, social services in Quebec were scarce, and mainly the Roman Catholic Church provided these services to most people. Duplessis took advantage of this situation and devised a bizarre scheme to make money. He targeted the socially vulnerable groups, in this case, mainly unwed mothers and orphans. The church and maternity homes urged many mothers to admit their children into orphanages as they were born out of wedlock. These orphan children of Quebec were systemically diagnosed with mental illnesses they didn't have. This was done solely for monetary gains. Subsidies for orphans were barely $1.25 per day, but for mentally ill patients, $2.75 were designated per day. These poor children were subjected to unnecessary torture, with many undergoing lobotomies and shock treatments they didn't need. To say the least, they were repeatedly abused physically, mentally, and sexually for many years. Nearly 20,000 children fell victim to this scheme. Many among these later spoke up and demanded justice as well as compensation. The Canadian government faced pressure from the Duplessis Orphans Committee, formed by 3,000 victims of this scheme, to provide them with justice. They eventually settled for around $25,000 per orphan, but this did not include any compensation for alleged victims of sexual or other abuse. The settlement was far from fair, owing to the fact that for every year of wrongful confinement, each victim received just $1,000, and the perpetrators walked free without even acknowledging that they had wronged so many children out of greed.
Wow.
15. The Grand Grimoire. While most of the Vatican archives still remain a secret, there is one frightening item in the Church's Chamber of Secrets that they definitely don't want anyone getting their hands on. It is known as the most dangerous book of spells ever to exist. This book is called Le Grand Grimoire and was reportedly written around 1520 by an apocryphal figure named Honorius of Thebes. This man claimed that he was possessed by Satan. The content of this book is written chiefly in biblical Hebrew or Aramaic. It was found in the tomb of the biblical King Solomon in the year 1750. Legend is that the Grand Grimoire, also known as the Red Dragon, is one of the most potent occult books in existence. It contains instructions on how to craft magical talismans and amulets, ways to conjure spells in order to win lotteries, and even methods to communicate with spirits and demons. The book also has spells to make people fall in love with you and to make yourself invisible. But the most nefarious thing in this centuries-old scripture is the method to summon Lucifer and instructions on how to make a deal with him. Many copies of this terrifying book were made after its publication, but experts believe these versions are either fake or modified to ensure the spells and summonings are useless. This was probably done to keep people from using these spells for evil and wrongdoing. Historians still think that all these versions have some kind of power, but the most powerful and effective one is the original manuscript that is owned by the Catholic Church. The Vatican might be a holy center for Christianity, but the scandals that keep emerging from this sacred city have tarnished the city's image in the past few decades, from financial fraud to child abuse and even aiding genocide. The Vatican is guilty of many abominable crimes against humanity that they've been desperate.
Yeah, so basically what this video proved to me is why I'm not a member of any type of organized religion or church, because they're all made up of men, and men fail. Men let people down. They do the wrong things. They're selfish and greedy, power hungry. So any organization built of men will corrupt eventually at some point somewhere. So definitely interesting video. Why don't you guys let me know what your thoughts are on the Catholic Church and the Vatican. I am not a fan of any organized religion. Matter of fact, yeah, just any of them. I don't like any of them. All right, guys, appreciate you stopping by. Links in the description. If you'd like to support the channel, www.mcclures.store is the website. We sell quality American products. Go see if we have something you could utilize. Get some cleaners, get some pet stuff, get a backpack, get a pair of boots, get a new holster. I don't know, get you something. Get you something. But I appreciate you guys stopping by. We are live on Rumble, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, all of that. But primarily Rumble is where we're trying to build it up. So we're live Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 3:30 to 5:30 Arizona time. I don't know what time it is where you're at now, but it's 5:25 here. So this is when we end the live, basically. So we're going to be wrapping up things for today. I definitely appreciate everybody stopping by and hanging out, dropping your comments, all that good stuff. And come see us on Wednesday. Come see us on Wednesday. All right, guys. Take care.